Let's look back at 2024. For movies, it was a notable year that had several strong and memorable pictures. From a superhero duo who gave us lots of laughs and action, to the second part of an epic sci-fi story, to the first act of an iconic musical. And for animated features, they also had a great year with awesome movies like... Okay, maybe this is not the best example. Let me try that again. For movies, it was a notable year that had several strong and memorable pictures. And for animated features, they also had... wait, hold on. No, this one is worse. Jeez. Sorry about that. Let's do it again. And for animated oh, come on! Seriously, 2024 kinda sucked, actually. With animated films, it's as if the theme of this year was to be careful what you wish for. Many of them have great potential in concept and sound like movies that people would want, but they end up either just missing those expectations or completely fall flat. Like you grab a monkey's paw and you ask for a fully animated movie of a comic strip icon, and you end up with possibly the most generic animated film of the year. You've been upset with Disney's recent films and you want another studio to make a Disney-style movie? And now you have something that makes Wish and Moana 2 look great in comparison. What's that? You want a cult favorite DreamWorks character to come back? Even the simplest requests can come with the biggest regrets. And don't even get me started with the year in general. That disaster amplified what I talked about times 10, especially when they have some bad long-term consequences. In fact, after the monkey's paw had its run with animated movies, Republicans desperately took it to demand for a literal felon to be president. Now watch this. That wish is going to hurt the people who voted for Trump more so than the people that they want to hurt. I mean, seriously, what do you expect from a government filled with billionaires who are just preventing a well-needed revolution against the 1% from happening? But back to the films. I'll admit that the year wasn't a complete bust. There were some that did come out strong. I'll even say that a few came out great. But when they're bad, they take their awfulness to the next level so that they can become much more than just the worst of the year. Rather if these movies are good or bad, I think we're in for quite an unforgettable countdown. I'm Animat, and welcome to the top 5 best and worst animated films of 2024.
The question. I know you heard the rumors. You must get over to it right away. Will you be tonight? That's the question.
Number 5.
Worst.
The Tiger's Apprentice. This is Paramount's lazy attempt at making a Spider-Verse knockoff. And the craziest part about that statement is that this is what the animators who worked on the film had to say about it. So you know it's bad when it's slammed by the people who made it. I'll give it that this could have been an awesome feature. It had the materials needed to turn Lawrence Yep's book into something fun with impressive world building and engaging action scenes. But while it got those elements right, everything else makes the film feel more dysfunctional. Both the writing and the directing were so weak that they leave the story, the comedy, the characters, and the tone to either be forgettable or broken down. But what really makes The Tiger's Apprentice a flop is that it was built with the intentions of not a movie, but the start of a potential franchise. With all of its unique ideas about a world based on the Chinese zodiac, just when you think you get to see all the cool abilities that the Guardians could do, the movie gives the spotlight to only a fraction of its own components. And it's not because of the limited resources or not enough talent. I know the movie was more than capable to present all the powers that it could show off. It's clear that it's just holding itself back in the hopes that it could gradually present the rest in sequels or maybe even a series. Then again, considering how Paramount gave this virtually no marketing and dumped it on its failing streaming service, I think it's safe to say that there will never be a Tiger's Apprentice franchise, and it ultimately leaves the film's potential to be wasted. It may be just an apprentice who is still learning, but it was obviously not ready for the action.
Haha, very funny, right?
Will you be tonight?
Number 4.
Worst.
Spellbound. Considering how this movie desperately tried to use the disgraced and perverted producer John Lasseter as its main selling point, this movie feels exactly like his existential crisis. This is John's desperate attempt of getting back what he lost due to his history of sexual misconduct by making his own Disney-style musical, especially to one-up the company now that their movies are not as strong as what they used to be. However, what he created at Skydance Animation was something that is far worse than anything from Disney. Even their recent animated films like Wish have more quality and entertainment value than whatever Spellbound attempted. It tried so hard to emulate that classic formula without understanding how it works that it results in an unpleasant experience with a terrible story with no sense of direction, characters that can be loathsome, comedy that can get increasingly annoying, and a message about divorce that's so badly handled that it harms the subject than actually helps it.
So you're done? Finished? Goodbye? What about me?
Alien, please.
However, it is lucky that it has some good elements as well, like the animation is pretty nice and it has a decent soundtrack. If it weren't for those, this could have easily been at the top of this list, because when some of the elements are bad, they could be the worst that were ever put in a movie. But if there's one thing that proves that this is a lost cause, is that this is not just any bad movie, this is specifically an Alan Menken musical that is bad. How the fridge do you mess up an Alan Menken musical? You'd have to put in more effort to make it awful than to make it good. It theoretically had what it took to make something better than anything that Disney recently put out, yet what they actually created was just an embarrassment. Say what you will about Disney nowadays, at least they don't have Lasseter with them anymore. Otherwise, he'd be as much of a deadweight as he is now at Skydance, and their movies would have been as unwatchable as this.
Will you be tonight?
Number 3.
Worst.
Thelma the Unicorn. Remember how critics were mercilessly hard on the Garfield movie for being a generic animated kids film? Well, imagine a feature that doubles down on that blandness and adds an additional mean-spirited tone. That's pretty much what you get with Thelma the Unicorn. In a way, the movie is very much like Thelma herself. Since her singing alone isn't enough to get the viewer's attention, as the soundtrack is easily forgettable, it resorts to using cheap tactics instead of implementing any form of meaningful creativity, thinking that it's an easier way of becoming popular. It has a tiringly overused story, characters that are unpleasant, uncomfortably weird designs, and it cannot stop pestering the viewer about its message of being yourself. But what really sucks about this movie is that I could see how this could have actually worked. It had a great opportunity to say something meaningful about Hollywood's fake imagery and how all the glitz and glamour that they publish to the public don't reflect on who those famous people actually are. But unfortunately, it doesn't want to take that interesting direction because this is the kind of feature that really underestimates its target audience. As this is a movie primarily aimed for kids, it believes that it could get away with putting little effort onto itself because kids don't seem to care about quality. Just present a pretty singing pony and the rest writes itself.
No, we're not making your music, you silly goose. The algorithm will give us the groove.
What are you talking about?
I think we all know that kids are smarter than that, and even they could see that this is just another piece of Hollywood trash that studios commonly put out. It's ironic because the movie turned out to be exactly what it says what not to become. All it tries to do is be like any other mainstream animated family film in the hopes that it could be as famous as a mainstream animated family film. But in the end, there's just not enough paint and glitter in the world to cover up this phony pony.
Look at that avalanche of doo-doo and fell right on her.
Will you be tonight?
Number 2.
Worst.
Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. I'll admit that I cannot confirm if this is the worst thing to ever come out of SpongeBob SquarePants, since I've never seen any of the seasons where the series went downhill or the spin-off shows like Camp Coral. However, even without that experience, I know that Saving Bikini Bottom is a strong contender for that title, as it is undeniably the worst SpongeBob movie. Actually, I'd hardly consider this to be a movie. Since it doesn't care about telling a story and leaving that to rot on the side, this is more like 75 minutes of being an obnoxious cartoon. As much as it may desperately try to be wacky like how the series can regularly be, nothing in this film works, and the amount of substance you get from it is far less than you would in a single episode of the show. With the combination of subpar animation and characters both old and new that do next to nothing, they both contribute to some of the worst comedy that ever came out of the franchise, as every joke makes the experience increasingly frustrating. It's one of those animated movies that puts in all of its efforts to be as over-the-top and cartoony as possible to distract the viewer from its complete lack of quality. But what is so baffling about the Sandy Cheeks movie is not just that it's bad, but it's how bad it can get. I'll give it that there is an element of surprise to the feature. Just when you think it can't sink any lower, it then presents something even worse that makes itself more disastrous than you could possibly imagine. Even to this day, there are some things that I can't believe that they allowed to present in the movie.
She wished she could take them out of the water so she could cuddle and sleep with them.
This had to go through layers of people so that it could get their approval to be shown like this in the final film. It really is the kind that the more I think about it, the more that it makes me upset.
I just wanted to cuddle.
While 2024 was supposed to be SpongeBob's 25th anniversary, Sandy's Gift was something that was so hopeless that, unlike Bikini Bottom, it is beyond saving.
All I'm good for is scampering.
Will you be tonight?
And the number one worst animated film of 2024 is... You know, I honestly contemplated if I should include this one on the list. I mean, yeah, it is infamously terrible, but it's one of those things that with the little effort it put onto itself, its main purpose, and where it ended up being released, I debated with myself if I should even consider this as an actual animated film to include here. Then again, some could argue the same about the other movies on the worst list, especially when they were all coincidentally released exclusively on streaming. In that case, I guess this counts as well. So, with that said, it does leave me with one question. What the fridge have they done to my boy Megamind?
Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate.
Technically, this is not meant to be a straightforward sequel to the 2010 DreamWorks film. This is a feature-length pilot to the Peacock series Megamind Rules. But either way, no animated movie this year received more anger and sheer disappointment than Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. For over a decade, fans have dreamed of the day that they would see the comeback of DreamWorks supervillain turn good, where he went on to become an internet superstar through viral memes. And when that day came to see the long-awaited return of Megamind, what they ultimately got was a poor excuse of a follow-up. Something that is nothing more but a cheap product that Universal and DreamWorks put out purely for the sake of profiting on Megamind's popularity without putting any form of effort. Seriously, the companies only gave the creative team a joke of a budget and told them to make both a movie and a show with it. As much as they tried, there was no hope to make something good when the project was doomed by the executives' impossible demands. And as a result, everything that people loved from the original Megamind was replaced with an insultingly bad imitation whose quality could be considered unfinished. And keep in mind, this is only regarding the Doom Syndicate. I don't even want to know how bad it gets with the series. This isn't just possibly the worst movie of the year, but this is also one of the worst animated sequels ever made, on par with features like Tentacolino. One would think that it would be impossible for a big-name studio to make a movie that could be as terrible as that disaster, but Megamind's big letdown was able to find a way. And that's what makes Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate the #1 worst animated film of 2024. Oh boy, something tells me that we'll be seeing some of them again as contenders for the worst of the decade. They really are that bad. But since we're around the halfway point, let's cleanse our mouths of that disgusting taste as we take a look at the honorable mentions. On top of the terrible features that I just talked about, what made 2024 feel like a weak year for animated films is that we also got a whole bunch that are kind of forgettable. They're not as bad as the ones from the worst list, sure, but they're not great or even good either. Maybe a few of them are okay and enjoyable in their own right, but they're generally the kind of movies that are subpar, but they have one or two elements that keep them away from being considered overall bad. They don't fit in either list, but they're still worth highlighting for their contribution in 2024. And they are Kung Fu Panda 4. The action is still awesome, but this is easily the weakest Kung Fu Panda film. The Garfield Movie. At worst, it's a very generic feature, but at best, it's harmless. Ultraman Rising. It has some captivating animation, but it's too bad that the script is mediocre. Despicable Me 4. Not the best in the franchise, but I'm surprised that I'm not tired of it yet and found this to be fun. Moana 2. It should have stayed as a Disney Plus series instead of being turned into a movie, but it's not bad and still better than Disney's direct-to-home media sequels. That Christmas. Maybe it's okay and it has that holiday heart, but it does feel dysfunctional with all the different stories it has to juggle. The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. It looks like a cool anime, but it's a Lord of the Rings movie that doesn't feel like The Lord of the Rings. And finally, Mufasa the Lion King. Yes, this is an animated movie, and while it's not very good, it's still better than the 2019 remake. Now, let's say I theoretically expanded my best and worst list to include these pictures. Where would I place them? In that case, the worst would also have Mufasa the Lion King, the Garfield Movie, That Christmas, and The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, and the best list would include Kung Fu Panda 4, Moana 2, Ultraman Rising, and Despicable Me 4. They won't be as remembered as either the best or the worst, but they still deserve to be honored as the mid-movies of the year.
So serious.
Will you be tonight?
Number 5. Piece by Piece. This is easily one of the most unique animated features this year. A documentary about the life of music artist Pharrell Williams that is entirely presented in Lego-style animation. I agree that it sounds really weird in theory, but in practice, the movie was able to pull it off quite well. Thanks to the directing of acclaimed documentarian Morgan Neville, the film is a fascinating look into not only how Pharrell went from a kid from Virginia Beach with a passion for music to one of the most influential music producers, but it also looks into the cultural impact he made and his collaborations with some of the industry's biggest names like Snoop Dogg, Jay-Z, Gwen Stefani, Kendrick Lamar, Pusha T, Daft Punk, and more to create some of the most well-known songs of the modern era. As for that Lego aspect, it not only makes this documentary stand out from Neville's other works, but also the animation itself is great. It emphasizes Pharrell's career of thinking outside of the box and breaking expectations, and brings back that spirit of the Lego Movie with its stop-motion-like colorful creativity. I'll even say that the animation might be better than the later Lego movies like Ninjago and the second part.
I would see beautiful hues of light cascading. I just thought that's what all black kids did, stared into the speaker like, whoa.
However, I wouldn't consider this to be the best animated documentary out there. Yes, this is Pharrell's documentary, but with the way that it portrays him as more than human, there are times when it can feel less like an honest look into Williams' life and more like Pharrell's feature-length commercial that mainly highlights his many achievements both in and out of music, and ignores any of his flawed moments. I'm just saying, don't expect this movie to have a Lego version of the blurred lines controversies. But even at that, it's still a solid film that gives you a good inside look into the music industry and Pharrell's creative process. As the first Lego movie from Universal, they started off with a movie that made me happy.
I firmly believe that everybody has talent, beauty, and potential.
Will you be tonight?
Number 4. Transformers 1. Who would have guessed that out of all the Transformers movies we've gotten over the years, a fully animated prequel from the director of Toy Story 4 turned out to be what many fans consider to be the best one yet? On the surface, this may seem like the typical prequel-style movie with the same tropes and the narrative about how two friends became the most well-known rivals in pop culture. Something that was a bit of a theme in 2024. And sure, some of that is kind of true here, along with the comedy, mostly from Bumblebee being weak, but this is a great example of the Transformers tagline of being more than meets the eye. On top of the epic action supplied by the beautiful animation that one would expect from a Transformers movie, what makes Transformers 1 a fan favorite is the strong story that presents how the Autobots and the Decepticons were formed. One that is fueled by the immersive world building that takes the history of their home planet Cybertron and make that an essential part of the movie, and the evolving relationship between the two lead characters.
But before we were enemies, we were like brothers. You ready?
Always ready. Let's punch in.
It doesn't matter if we all know the outcome of their friendship. Both Orion Pax and D16 carry the whole picture as they present their bond as a tragedy. They were once two best friends who only had each other, but when faced with their true purpose, their connection gradually breaks as they ultimately become Optimus Prime and Megatron. It's an unforgettable dynamic that is forged by the writing that honors the legacy of the franchise and some powerful voice acting that highlights their growth throughout the movie. I'll admit that I was never a big Transformers fan, but not only did this feature amaze me, but it also gave me this newfound appreciation to both the franchise and the deep lore that explains how they're much more than giant robots who could turn into vehicles. With a bond that transformed into an intense rivalry, this is the one Transformers movie that you gotta watch.
It's time to show them we are more than meets the eye.
Oh, no.
Will you be tonight?
Number 3. Orion and the Dark. Out of all the animated films here, this is what I consider to be the most underrated movie of the year. And there's honestly a part of me that is upset at the way it got treated. Not only did DreamWorks dump this onto Netflix instead of giving this a chance to have a theatrical release, but later during award season, it could only compete as a TV movie or a TV special when it could have been a strong contender for the Best Animated Feature category. It's too bad because this is a powerfully heartfelt feature. It doesn't just educate audiences about the bright side of darkness, no pun intended, but it also presents it in a way that is very emotional to allow the viewer to connect with the characters and be more engaged with what's going on. On top of having a nice message about facing your fears and discussing about how the dark is an essential part of our world, the movie also supplies some creatively fun animation, a strong emotional core, and memorable characters that personify elements of the dark, or even darkness itself, that are packed with a great voice cast. I'll admit that it's not a perfect feature, since it doesn't have the best story structure, or even much of a story to begin with, but it does make up for it with Charlie Kaufman's clever writing that allows the movie to sometimes get meta with itself.
Everyone is against me. It didn't get into Sundance, and it's so much better than half of the movies there. Ugh, it's such a boys' club.
In a way, the best way to describe Orion in the Dark is if DreamWorks created their own version of Inside Out, but themed to darkness. It's a great educational tool for kids to understand how the dark is not scary, while also being a great animated adventure that is filled with colorful characters who can supply a lot of laughs and a lot of heart to create an unforgettable experience that can give you a new perspective and appreciation on a common part of life. This movie has been kept in the dark for quite some time now, and I think it's time that we finally give it the spotlight that it deserves. And yes, that was intended.
Remember when you told me you were actually a really great guy, and I didn't believe you?
Yeah?
I'm starting to believe you.
Will you be tonight?
Number 2. Inside Out 2. Speaking of Inside Out, we cannot talk about the animated films of 2024 without bringing up the biggest movie of the year that not only broke records throughout the summer, but went on to become the new champion as the highest grossing animated feature of all time, beating out Frozen 2 and the 2019 remake of The Lion King. That's quite an impressive achievement. But what is also impressive is how Pixar was able to create a sequel that is almost on par to their 2015 masterpiece. I've heard many people say that this is so far the best non-Toy Story Pixar follow-up, and when thinking about it, I think I agree. It takes everything that we love from the original and expands this concept to go deeper into how the human mind functions in a colorfully creative way. It's packed with a great story from both perspectives of the emotions and Riley as she goes into hockey camp, amazing animation that supplies new emotions and new areas that brings part of the human mind to life, and enjoyable characters both old and new. But a big part of what makes Inside Out 2 so strong is the sequel's main new addition, anxiety. Along with an incredible performance by Maya Hawke, who stands out from the film's strong voice cast, she is a great personification of the mood and helps visualize how it feels on the inside when we're anxious. Her role may seem antagonistic, but to truly understand anxiety is to understand that she is not the villain.
Fear protects her from the scary stuff she can see, and my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see. I plan for the future.
Just like with the first, it succeeds at using this to develop a thought-provoking commentary about how the human mind works. In the case with the sequel, it discusses about what happens when you're having stress and how you can internally manage it. In a way, Inside Out 2 is like what Across the Spider-Verse was the previous year. A sequel to a beloved animated feature that went on to become a great summer phenomenon. That and they both had a chaotic nightmare of a production. But by being a worthy successor to Inside Out, it made audiences feel the biggest emotions and went on to become the biggest movie of the year.
Remember when we all finally came up to headquarters?
Nostalgia.
That was like 30 seconds ago, nostalgia.
Yeah, those were the days.
Will you be tonight?
And the number 1 best animated film of 2024 is The Wild Robot. In all my years of doing these annual videos, I don't think I've ever had one where the same studio had movies that took the number 1 spot on both the best and the worst list. It's an extremely rare case, but as you can see here, it's not impossible for it to happen. I'll admit that prior to its release, I was hesitant when I heard that critics were literally calling this the best movie from DreamWorks Animation. That's a very bold claim right there, since the studio is capable of making some true masterpieces. But when I finally went to watch it, I don't think I'd call it the best, but I did understand what the hype was all about. The Wild Robot is a movie about disrupting the status quo and breaking the rules in order to become a better version of yourself. And in many ways, that's what the movie did in order to put itself on the top of this list. It's the closest that a mainstream animated feature can feel like an independent movie. The concept is very simple, as it takes the story from the Peter Brown novel about a robot who is stranded on an island that is populated by animals, but it makes up for it by putting all of its energy onto the emotional core, resulting in one of the most heartfelt experiences of the year. And on top of that, every element was carefully crafted to ensure that they could be at their best. The animation is beautiful with its painterly art style and grand cinematography that makes the most out of every shot. The voice acting is great to really let out the emotions of the cast. The characters are very lovable to the point that they can easily bring a tear to your eye. And the score adds that extra elevation to enhance the mood. It's worth noting that this is the final animated feature from DreamWorks that is fully produced in-house, since the animation of their next films will be outsourced. And if this marks the end of an era for the studio, then this is a spectacular finale. I think it's debatable at best to consider this the best DreamWorks movie, but I can confidently say that The Wild Robot is the #1 best animated film of 2024. And that's all I've got for the top 5 best and worst animated films of 2024. We definitely got some good movies this year, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, they result in a pretty weak year where they generally range from mid to bad. Not to mention that we also got some of the worst. However, I get a good feeling that we're gonna get a much better year with 2025. Well, at least for animated films. Yes, that year will come with a lot of chaos, but I think you'll find that some of these will be worth looking forward to. Hope this will be a better divorce-themed Netflix film than Spellbound. Let Sony cook, they might be onto something. Just be better than the Sandy Cheeks movie, that's all I ask. Oh great, the Twits leading Skydance are at it again. And speaking of the Twits, maybe the adaptation of the Roald Dahl book will be fun. Oh my goodness, Laika is back! This is not a drill! Already watched this and I love it. I'm not expecting greatness, but it does look cute. This is the moment that cartoon fans have been waiting for. Let's be thankful that Disney and Pixar are still making original films, and this one could have potential. Will Paramount make a better Smurfs movie than Sony? I'm with the furries on this one. I am so hyped for this sequel. I'm obviously too old for the show, but I guess the kids are gonna like it? I'm with the furries on this one. I am so hyped for this sequel. And finally, well, if the Plankton movie doesn't work out, at least SpongeBob has a backup plan with his big screen return. See you later, dudes. Hey, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to give this a like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to support what I do while getting some awesome rewards, then join my Patreon at patreon.com/animat. And from there, we can make our 2025 be a little more special. Hope you all have a great year, and once again, until next time, see you later, dudes.
Sometimes, to survive, we must become more than we were programmed to be.